Well, hello, everybody. How's it going today? My name is Tom Pohl, and I'm here to tell you how I met your printer. Uh, I just want to first introduce who I am and what I do. I'm the penetration testing team manager for LMG Security out of Missoula, Montana. And I like to do things like play CTFs. I've won a few black badges in my time and other badges or other competitions. There's me hard at work. At home, actually, I never wear a hoodie. I don't even wear sunglasses. But and I am an evil twin. In fact, my twin brother's right there in the audience. Hi, Andy. All right. So and then also shout out to my buddies at both SecDSM and SecKC out of Des Moines and Kansas City. I split my time there sometimes. I love hanging out with all those guys. So if anybody's in the room from either of those. Hi, I love you guys. All right, so roadmap. What are we doing today? We're talking about printers, why we hack printers, how we're going to get into printers. I've got several methods for attacking printers, and then we'll go beyond printers into other things. And then at the very end, I'm going to talk about how to protect your organization from people like me. Now, before I get started, cell phones, you know the drill. I just want to preface this. At some point, you may feel the need that you need to call somebody right away. Just take a deep breath. It'll be okay. And also, I like this to be interactive. So if you guys, want to talk or interrupt me in the talk, feel free. I've got actually shot glasses. So if you ask me a great question, I'm going to throw, it's silicone, so you won't get hurt, but I'll throw it at you the best I can and for great questions. So I like to keep this interactive. But first of all, why do we hack printers? Because they're everywhere, right? These printers are in your office environments, and the smarter the printer, the more likely it is that I'm going to be able to hack it and get some passwords out. All right, so first of all, how do we get into these printers? So these printers are hooked up to your network, your corporate network, and they have a management interface typically, and then they provide functionality. Well, when I get onto your network, so I do internal penetration tests on people's organizations. In order to get into these printers, 90% of the time, it's through default credentials, right? You go to Google, say, hey, here's the model number, what's the default username and password, and out pops whatever it is for those printers. And in most people's organizations, they don't change them. I don't know why they don't change them. Actually, I do know why. There's several reasons. A lot of times, it's not the IT staff that's managing that printer, right? A lot of times, it'll be a third party who's like, oh, you can't change that password or we won't be able to get print counts off of it, or whatever it is the reason why they decide not to change the passwords. But sometimes default credentials don't work, and I've got ways around that. So this is in particular Rico. I think Rico and Savin are about the same company, where like say the default credentials were changed. Good for them. But in this particular case, it's great. There's a second default account that they probably don't know about, like the supervisor account. You know what the password is to the supervisor account?
Supervisor.
No, it's blank. And there's only one function that the supervisor account can do. Do you know what that is? Change the admin password. So literally you come into the interface, change the password to whatever I want it to be, and then I go log in as administrator, and I can manage the printer however I want. It's awesome. Thank you. So why do we want to steal passwords, right? Well, first of all, why steal passwords when the printers will just give them to you, right? And I do this through a technique called pass-back attacks. These are not new techniques, but I feel like the more people I talk to, the more like a lot of people, this is kind of a lost art. And so I get the device to send me the password so I don't have to steal it, right? And I'll cover several different methods today, including LDAP, SMTP, and then also file shares, right? And so the first one I'm going to talk about is LDAP, so Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. How this is relevant to a printer is that often you'll walk up to like these multifunction printers and you'll type in like your name and it'll go like look up your email address in Active Directory, and then so you can scan, it comes to your email, and then but it's got to be able to log into Active Directory to look up your email address. Well, what's great is that in the printer, that's going to be a domain user account of some sort, and so when I get into your admin interface, oh, by the way, you'll notice here, I'm not attacking one specific brand of printer. I'm an equal opportunity exploiter. So you'll see I've got every single manufacturer you can imagine. I've got some kind of a technique that I've done on these printers in the real world. In fact, all of these screenshots are actually from real penetration tests. This one actually was one of our research printers, but real penetration tests within the last 8 months. So I mean, this is a real problem that happens every day, every week with a lot of organizations around the country, if not around the world. But in this particular case, in the management interface, in your LDAP settings, in this particular case, you just change the server address to whatever I want it to be. And when you do that, it doesn't clear out the password that was already there. So I just say, hey, I don't want you to talk to the Active Directory domain controller to look up email addresses. I want you to talk to me. And then they have a lovely test button at the bottom of the page. So I just change the IP address, hit the test button, and out pops the credentials that were put into that printer, because it's literally, I just set up, in this particular case, a simple listener that can talk a little bit of LDAP, and it feeds me directly the username and password. It's just that easy. It's going to be like this the whole day. Yeah, this is just a packet capture. I just ran a PCAP of doing this transaction. You could actually even set up a netcat listener listening on 389 or whatever port and just hit the test button. It'll like send you the credentials there. In this particular case, I set up a stub kind of fake LDAP server, and then I had it talk to that, and I'm like, oh, just run a PCAP there. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can capture these passwords. I'll even run, in some of these examples later, responder, something like that, something that'll just show you the credentials as they come through. So that's the LDAP example. This is probably one of my favorite ones, because if you can get these credentials are going to come to you in clear text, and they're awesome. But then the next version will be simple mail transfer protocol. So SMTP. Why would these printers have SMTP? Good for a shot glass. Why would these printers have SMTP credentials?
Scan to mail.
Scan mail. All right.
Scan to mail.
Oh, scan mail. Correct. There you go. Oh,
Oh,
sorry, sir. Oh, you didn't get hit. Okay, great. All right. Well, let's give this a try on a Kyocera this time. So, like I said, I'll attack all sorts of different kinds of printers. But yeah, they send email. So these documents, like if you're scanning from a piece of paper, it's got to send email. And scan a physical document to a PDF to have it emailed. Now, you need an email account, right? No longer, everybody's switched to Office 365 or Google Cloud, whatever it is. So now you have to set up SMTP authentication. Well, that's where we come into play, right? So we'll get into the email settings, and there'll be the SMTP server name. Like in this particular case, we're logging into smtp.office365.com. And then down below, you'll see that there's a username and a password already set up, copy or at. And so we'll go ahead and those are the credentials that we want to steal. And then look, there's a nice test button. These printer manufacturers are so nice to us. All I have to do, in fact, and then you'll notice down at the bottom, see how it says SMTP security, start TLS? Well, we don't want security, right? So what we'll do, we'll just go in there and we'll just change it from start TLS to off, because I don't want I don't want to be encumbered by this nasty security stuff. So we'll go ahead and turn that off. And then in this case, I ran responder, and I hit the test button, and out pops clear text username and password for the SMTP server for their Office 365, which is great. Because then now I can, these credentials typically will then work on their internal corporate network, right? Because ADFS or whatever they're calling it now, you're syncing these passwords from your on-prem up into the cloud. And so these credentials that will then work on their internal environment typically. There's cases where it won't work, and we'll cover that at the end. In general, these are domain credentials. So now I went from having no credentials on an environment using a default credential, and now I've got some level of a domain level credential on the network. Why would I want just a regular domain user on your network? What's that going to give me?
Anonymous.
Yeah, it's not even anonymous. It's going to give, it'll be like, why is this scanner doing all the things? But yeah, I can enumerate your Active Directory. Often, are you guys any system administrators out there? How often are your users given access to stuff they shouldn't be given access to? Like everybody gets access to everything, right? Or, we didn't know that we gave you access to that. And that's what so I'll start by getting a low-level user account and then see where I can go from there. My favorite, here's a first shot glass. If on your network, this is particularly for network administrators, you've got a file share, and it's got a $ at the end of the file share, and it's not $C, $D. What's that? Hidden, right. My question is why would you name that file share with a $ at the end? Who's what's that?
Security by obscurity.
There you go.
Security by obscurity.
Security by obscurity. That's exactly correct. The problem is that if you're an IT administrator and you put a $ in the end because you're trying to hide shit, right? And what's usually you're trying to hide? Like I was on a penetration test where there was a $ named share. They had some provisioning accounts in there, so they had a domain admin password in a clear text file on the hidden share. They thought, it's hidden, nobody will see it. But to somebody like me, I'm gonna see that file share, and I'm gonna be like, they're hiding shit there. That's the first place I'm gonna look on your network. Anyways, so to continue on. Now, we'll go ahead and, so this is another example of the SMTP issue, but you'll see in this particular case, there's no test button. All right. But pay close attention to the bottom right corner of the screen there. There's some stuff going on with this printer. Maybe we can test something. So in this particular case, in this case, they actually the SMTP server name used their protection.outlook.com address, and they had SMTP authentication turned off. Do you know why this happens? It's because often you can allow unauthenticated SMTP if you're coming from a particular IP address in Office 365. And so in this particular case, if you're coming from the Office address, they can relay mail through Office 365 with their domain and be able to relay email without credentials. And you'll see their SMTP authentication is turned off, but I still see a username and password. Do you think there's credentials in there, even though the SMTP authentication is turned off? Yeah. Yep. And so in this particular case, it's stored anyways. And we'll go ahead and just turn that SMTP authentication on because this time we actually do want security, right? So we'll go ahead and turn that on. We'll change the SMTP server to our evil server, but there's no test button here, right? So, but this is something that nobody ever sets up on their printers. Auto email notifications. So in these printers, there's an option typically to say, hey, when this thing has a problem, send an email to somebody so that they'll know about it. Like when it's out of paper, or it's jammed, or it's got toner almost low, or all these different situations. So I went ahead in that interface and I set up all the notifications to come to me. And actually, it didn't matter what email address I used because I already changed the SMTP server to me. And so as soon as I said, oh yeah, let me know when all these any of these situations occur, I went ahead and you remember the lower right hand corner of that front page? How it was almost out. It was the toner is almost out and the paper is almost out and there's paper left on the output tray. So as soon as I set up auto email notifications, guess what I got? The printer's like, I've never told anybody. I must tell somebody right now. And so literally, as soon as I turn on auto email notification, instantly I get SMTP credentials that then worked on the client environment. So no test button, but we can still do it. I love it. Oh, and this account, this particular time, the reason why I think they turned off SMTP authentication, they did it by IP address, was because the user that I got in this particular case was a domain administrator. So they're like, oh, we shouldn't send domain administrator credentials across the network. Let's do IP-based authentication. But then they never cleared out the credentials. And in my experience, what's that? Oh, okay, question.
Yeah. So just wondering how bad these implementations are. So the password was not hidden in the form field, right?
So it's not hidden in the form field. So these printers are smart. So so let me tell you, printer manufacturers in general don't let you just like view source, right click view source, here's the password. And also if you were to export a backup, those backups are typically encrypted with a key that's baked into the firmware. And you know, I'm too lazy to go dig out all the firmware and grab that key and then decrypt the backup myself. Why do that? Because I'm lazy. I'm just going to go ahead and figure out a way to get the printer to send it to me instead. Yeah, here you go. Thanks for bringing that up, because I totally forgot that part. But yeah, I love that. Yeah, and if actually I'm giving a talk on Friday at DEF CON about private keys in public places. So come see my talk on Friday, and I think you'll enjoy some of the things I do there. 1:30 in track 1 on Friday. So at any rate, but yeah, you can get private keys out of the firmware and decrypt the backups, but I'm too lazy for that today. So I'm getting to passwords another way. All right, and like I said, they turned off SMTP authentication because it was a domain administrator. And in my experience, when these printers are being fed credentials to do LDAP lookups or SMTP and so forth, 40% of the time in my experience, that account's been a domain administrator. Right? Because it's going to have the access. Well, what access should the printer have when it's doing an email address lookup on your network? What should it be able to do? Look up an email address. What should it not be able to do? Anything else, exactly. But you know, if it's domain admin, it should be able to do its job just fine. All right, so let's take this to the next level. We'll take a quick detour and say, let's try this. So in the particular cases of Office 365, let's go ahead and go log into their Outlook, their Office 365 tenant, right? So I'll use those credentials, go to Outlook. Is it gonna have MFA on this account? No MFA. No, you can't do that. How's the printer gonna do that? So in this particular case, we'll just go to their Office 365 and we'll log in with the copier account. And typically, these accounts in the inbox, there's nothing of real interest because all you're going to get is auto replies, right? You scan to your email address, it goes to your mailbox, and then you might get an out of office reply or something like that. But if you go to the sent items, you're going to have every document this printer has ever sent in the sent items folder. And also, this is the best part, is if you've got multiple printers in your organization, it's going to be from that printer and every other printer in the entire organization. Because they set up these printers all to have the same credentials. They didn't set up, oh, this is printer A's SMTP credentials, printer B's. No, they use the same credentials on every printer. So now you have access to every document that every printer has ever scanned and emailed to somebody else in the entire organization in the sent items. That's pretty scary, isn't it? Sorry for all the redaction, but this was from a client, so they had a lot of sensitive stuff in there. So in this particular case, you hack one printer and you've literally hacked them all, right? Because you've got all the documents. All right. So that was example number 2, and a little bit of diversion as to what we can do with some of these credentials. The third main kind of technique that I use is scan to file shares, right? So often, if you're not sending the scans to your email, you're going to scan it to some kind of repository on a share drive or something like that. And this is the only case where I'm not going to get a clear text password. but it doesn't mean that I'm stopped, right? In this particular case, I'm hitting an HP printer. HP, this one in particular, I don't think it had any authentication whatsoever. You go to the printer and they're like, what do you want to do? You can do anything you want here. So it's wide open network interface in this particular case. And you go to the network scan folder and you'll see that they have scan to the S drive. What does S stand for? Shared drive. Yep. And look at that. They have an edit button and a test button right there. I don't know if I can point, if you can see that. Yeah, both edit and test, so that we can both change where it's scanning to, and then we can test our change to make sure it still works. All right. So in this particular case, so the network, so it'll be a network path name, right? So it'll be whack and then like their file server into the scans directory, and then they'll have a username and password. And so just like before, we'll go ahead and change that path to be our server, or we can be on the network. We could, if they allow egress off of their network, we could do something on the internet. Typically, when we do penetration tests, we'll deploy a box to your network. So we typically send a box to our customer, and our customer will plug it into like a user subnet, just like any other user might, and then we'll do we'll start our testing from there. So in this particular case, that I changed that network path to be my box on their network, and then set up to get the credentials we want to steal. And so in this, and then we come back and we just hit the test button, and this triggers what's called an NTLM v2 handshake. And so when you scan to a file share, you're not actually sending the password over the network. We're actually doing a handshake, and then where basically the server will send a challenge to the client, and the client will hash that with the password, and then we'll kind of determine like, yep, I know the password, you know the password, but in this case, I don't know the password. And I'm like, no, you're totally wrong, but it'll give me that hash, and with that hash, you can then crack that. So using like Hashcat or some kind of password cracker, and then you can, basically figure out what that password was. So because I know what the challenge was because I provided it and it's in the handshake, and then I have the hash credential, and then I feed that into Hashcat, and then we will be ready to crack this evilly good password, right? So at LMG, we actually have a couple of password cracking rigs. In fact, I think we've got like 10 GTX 1080s, so they're kind of dated now. And it took about a second and a half to crack this password. I think it actually took more time to warm up the cards than it took to crack the password, because the password was Canon 1. All right, anybody remember what kind of printer this was? HP. Do you know why? Do you know why the password's Canon 1? They used to have a Canon, that's right. That's right. So they went ahead and, when they upgraded the printer, they didn't upgrade the password. So that's cool. And so then now I had a user credential that I could use across their network. Yeah, any questions about that? And then what's great is, oh yeah, go ahead.
With those password cracking rigs, like most like domains are going to have like 15 characters now, right?
Excuse me, do you mind talking to the mic? That way be on the record.
Yeah, sure. Curious about the password cracking rigs, because most domains or places are going to have requirements for 15 character passwords or something beyond, right?
Right.
So have you run into that, and how long did that take, or did you get there?
So here's the funny part about passwords that with high password requirements. So the question was, do I ever come across a non-guessable password? Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes. But what's cool is that, so with an NTLM v2 handshake, you can handshake with me, or in a lot of times I'll run two tools together. I'll run like NTLM Relay X with a responder. And so if you've got any unsigned SMB hosts, where basically the server doesn't and the client don't require to validate who's doing that challenge, then I can relay that connection. So basically, you come to me and I'll be like, well, I know that server will let me authenticate, acting as anybody. I will then connect out to it. He'll give me the challenge. I'll feed it back to you. You do the hash. And so I'm just sitting here in the middle. And once the server's like, oh yeah, that totally worked. You've got access. Now I have an open connection between my attacking host and that server that was authenticated by you for me. So then I can actually sit in the middle, and then I'll have an open connection that then I can use proxy chains and in conjunction with some of my other tools, so that then use the access that you basically logged in for me. I don't know your password at that point, but I don't need it because I got you to log in for me. And so then I can use that level of access against any servers or other equipment that doesn't have SMB signing enabled. So that's kind of awesome. But if they do have a really good password, that's what I'll typically do. And sometimes I've had failures, right, where I don't get the password out that way. But a lot of times, like in the example of being able to send email, well, there's typically a couple credentials, right? There's one for SMTP and one for LDAP. So if I can't get the SMTP credential, I likely could still get the LDAP credential, because you'll have a couple different ways that you're logging into your environment. What's cool is that these techniques aren't just limited to printers. In this particular network, so this example, I have to give a shout out to one of my penetration testers, Emily. Actually, she was supposed to be here, but she's stuck in Texas. Hi, Emily. I hope you're watching. She's an amazing penetration tester. She actually hit the super micro where she was able to log in and see that the super micro was actually configured to build itself. So this is an IPMI interface in this particular for the super micro server is like, it's bare bones. You can reboot the box, you can rebuild the box, you can manage it. And so in this particular case, she got in there and realized that they had a share host and then a user credential, username and password to build up that server. So it'd pull an ISO off of a file server, and then it'd build up that machine with that ISO. And so it had a username and password in there. And so we went ahead and did the same attack with the credentials we want to steal, but we weren't able to crack that password. So this is a particular case where we got a username and password, we got an NTLM v2 handshake, we weren't able to crack the password. But this is a super micro. If you do some Googling, you'll realize that you can pull the backup file from the super micro configuration and then forensically recover the clear text credential from the backup because it wasn't encrypted like some printers do. And so we had, in that user credential, domain administrator. And so now you know why I love printers so much. So this is why I love printers. So now the road we've traveled, right? Printers are everywhere. We've got all these pass-back attacks. We've gone beyond printers and talking about getting into other devices. So basically anything that you stick credentials into, any IoT device. I actually broke into a Crestron. Do you guys know what Crestron is? So it's a multimedia system, but a lot of times they'll have like a room calendar. Like, have you ever gone to a conference room and they'll have the calendar of the day and they'll show you all meetings are in there? It's got to have a credential in order to pull the calendar, right? So if you can get into the interface of the Crestron, you can be like, oh, your calendar URL is not over there now at Office 365, it's over here. And so you can do the same kind of attack. So it's not just printers that have this issue. Pretty much anything that you feed credentials to that has a configuration URL in it will have similar kinds of problems. So it's glorious. But how can we protect our networks? So I've got a few ways that you can stop people like me, right? First of all, segment your network. Who should be able to access the management interface of the printer? IT admins. Who else should? Nobody, exactly. So if you don't need access to those interfaces, make sure that random internet strangers on your network can't get into that, right? Also, make sure you set up and require authentication for all your printers, for all the default accounts. Actually, I find this in other equipment. Like take, for example, UPSs. Right, a lot of times there'll be multiple credentials, and and the IT staff will know about the main credential, but they won't necessarily have looked up and realized that there's multiple default credentials on these devices. And then require encrypted authentication. Most of these printers don't have TLS. Or if they do, it's a self-signed certificate. You can actually generally replace the certificates, blessed by your own certificate authority on your internal networks. And then also, you remember back in the SMTP example where it was going to Office 365? And then I was able to go log into the Office 365 web interface. Are you guys familiar with app passwords? So basically, you can set it, like Google in particular. I think people are used to this. If you set up an email client, that you can go create an app specific password, so that say you set up an SMTP password for a username and password that is different than the mailbox account's password. And the only place where that will work when you allocate it is SMTP. So I had exactly one customer that I've run into so far that I got their SMTP credentials, and I went to the Office 365 interface, and you know what it said? I'm sorry, you have to use the regular password, not the app password to log in. And I thought that was awesome. Like that's how you can block that. Like it's got to send the credentials. Use a credential that only works for SMTP. I did have one other client that I got the password, but it was an account that they didn't sync back on-prem. That was another way that I've seen that approach work. So it only worked in the Office 365 environment, and then it was Office 365 native account, and it wasn't synced back down to AD. So even though it has some good credentials, I couldn't actually use them anywhere on the rest of their organization. So that was good too. And then also, deploy identity access management. Did you know that actually, I got a couple shot glasses left. What service might be set up that you could set up on a printer that nobody ever sets up that can help you? Go ahead in the back. SNMP, that's true. It's not often set up, but that's not the one I'm looking for. Yeah, go ahead. What's that? Nope, not FTP either. Yeah, over here. Nope, not Telnet. Nope, not, secure LDAP, I'll just turn that off, just like in the SMTP example. Nope, not HTTP. Not SSH. Nope. What's that? Nope, syslog. Every printer has the ability to syslog to a syslog server. So syslog is basically a way of any event that happens on the printer, you can send those events off to like your Splunk, and then you can report it. How often do you think you should report if somebody logs into the management interface of your printer? Every time, because they're going to do it one time 6 years ago and never log in again. So if somebody were to log into that interface, might be a notable issue that you might want to look into. But yeah, nobody ever sets that up. But I highly recommend setting that up on all your printers, if for anything, to know if there's somebody poking around on your network. Could be another employee. And then the last recommendation I have is just go Office space on your printers and just burn them all to the ground. We're all going to DocuSign and everything else, right? Why do we need printers anymore? We're all working from home. Let's get rid of...
DocuSign is so well versed in security.
Good point. DocuSign is so well versed in security. You're not wrong. Oh, here, did you get a shot glass? No. Oh, here you go. Nice catch.
I got a shot glass for pooping on DocuSign. That was awesome.
Awesome.
DocuHack.
DocuHack. There you go. Perfect. Well, does anybody else have any questions? Anything that I went over a little bit too quickly? Or I did go kind of fast today. I apologize. Yeah, go ahead. The question is, will I be posting this PowerPoint on the internet? I sure can. There's this video I think will be available on YouTube. Actually, I think it's live streaming right now. It'll be available later on YouTube as well. But there's no reason why we couldn't host it for sure. Any other questions? Yeah, right here.
Which one?
In the white shirt.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite printer manufacturer?
A favorite printer manufacturer? Boy, that's like asking your favorite child. Somebody asked me once, is there one that I've got 100% success ratio? And it was Brother. I've hacked into every Brother I've ever seen. Not my twin brother. Well, I don't know. But Xerox is another great one. Actually, Xerox has got some good hacks out there with like known static keys for backup files. So Xerox is good. Savin, Rico. Kyocera, for some reason, even when you set up the password, I've been able to get into it with no credentials and then create my own password on top of another account that's been there. So yeah, there's every printer I've ever looked into has got some kind of problem. But honestly, probably the Rico's my favorite because a lot of people don't know about the supervisor account. Yeah, and if it's like, oh yeah, because I actually had a really good client. They're really secure. We test the crap out of them. They didn't know about the supervisor account. And I'm like, hey, can I change your administrator password? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. They laughed at me like, if you think you can. And then I said, don't worry, I'll let you know what your password is later. And then they were very surprised that in that particular case, not only did I get the password, actually it was a different client, I got the password to that printer because I changed the administrator password, but then that user account had access to file shares that included the development code for some of their web applications that were hosted at Amazon. Guess what I found in the source code? Hard-coded credentials, root secret keys to their AWS environment. So from hacking a printer, guess what I hacked? To the cloud, right? I hacked their entire AWS environment because I hacked a printer. So that's how valuable, being able to attack printers is, right? Is you can literally escalate your privileges. Yeah, go right here, free hugs.
Is that an undocumented feature for Rico, or did you do any type of disclosure to them?
As far as I Googled, right? I'm like, hey, what's the default credentials? And it was like, hey, there's admin, but there's also the supervisor account. And I'm like, what's the supervisor account? And so I literally tried logging into it. I'm like, oh, cool, but it didn't give me access to the regular interface. But that's when I went to the admin interface, and I'm like, oh, but I can change the administrator password. So yeah, it was through trial and error, but it's well known. Most of these issues. The thing that I think printer manufacturers that is probably CVE worthy would be the fact that if you change the host name, it should clear out the credentials. Don't you think? I think we've demonstrated that well enough. You change the host name and the password's no longer valid. Actually, I did have one printer, I can't remember what model, it may have even been an HP, which shocked me at the time and it was great because you can tell different development teams. Like when I went to the LDAP interface and I changed the IP address and I tabbed off of it, it cleared out the username and password. I thought, whoa, it cleared out those fields. And I'm like, wow. I wasn't about to save it because I hate going back to the customer and being like, yeah, sorry, I cleared out your credentials on your printer. So I didn't mess with that interface. But then I went to the SMTP side, and I changed the IP address, tabbed off. It didn't clear out the credentials. So it's interesting to see that maybe sometimes some manufacturers might do that, but I actually have never actually seen it consistently anywhere. Thanks, sir. That's a great question. Oh yeah, right over here.
You said you have an almost 100% breaking in, rooting these printers. Are there any printers that you find the default flow actually accounts for some of these things? Like during setup, they require you to reset the passwords, or where maybe naive IT admins actually end up, being okay? Like, do you ever see a printer on a network and you're like, wow, this one's actually, annoying to try and get into or more difficult?
I've never actually set up printers in my. I used to be a blue teamer for most of my career. I actually never did a lot with printers in my blue team side of my career, but I've not seen a particular brand. I know, say I take iDRAC as a great example. Dell's IPMI kind of interface for management. I know, I think starting with version 9 and above, there's now a default password that's unique to that server printed on a label, the pull-out service tag label. They'll have the password there. I've seen that with some of these servers. I don't think I've seen that with a printer yet. Yeah, and often if they had something like that, I'm sure whoever is managing these printers are going to be like, oh, that's terrible to have a unique printer for every, or a password for every printer. So they'll change it to be, their standard.
New brothers are doing that.
Are they? The new brothers are? Well, I love it. Maybe it won't be my favorite printer from if I see a new one. I've never seen a brother that isn't at least 6 years old. Oh yeah, question.
Kind of follow up to that, is there a printer that you recommend people buy that is more difficult to get into, or?
Nope. I don't have one that, like I said, I'm an equal opportunity exploiter. I've never gotten into one where I've been like, oh shoot. So what's interesting is even, in an organizational perspective, a lot of times an organization will standardize on one model printer. So you'll see, oh, I see these 10 of the same printer. Test every printer. Do you know why? One of them was bought newer, and they didn't set it up like they set up the original one. So if they change the default credential on 9 of them, there's probably the 10th one has got the default credentials. And they didn't change the password there because they got a new IT guy and he didn't know they should change the password to the printer. But they went ahead and fed it to LDAP credentials anyways. So test every printer, and you think they might be a common credential. Yeah, go ahead, over here.
Have you had trouble getting into printers that may need you to use something such as like a PIV card or something before you actually use it?
So the question is, have I ever gotten into a printer where they had like a HID card? I assume you're talking about like you print, but it doesn't actually print to the printer until you walk up and you badge scan into the printer and then it pops your print.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about? I've not had a problem with those either. Typically, those are add-on applications or plugins in the software, the management interface, that then that plugin will have some of its own configuration details for doing the walk-up badge printing. But still the management interface is still managed the same way as all the other printers. So I have clients that have that, and I've seen that. I'm like, that's kind of cool. I'm gonna have to explore that some more. But I still got into the printers and got the credentials I was interested in, no problem. Right here in the front.
How often do phishing emails work from that SMTP address?
Yes, how often do phishing emails work from that SMTP address? Always. Always. And so it depends on the scope of my test, right? If I'm on a red team engagement where I'm mission-based to try to get something, I'm going to fish the hell out of people. If it's an internal penetration test, that's not necessarily in scope for what I'm trying to do. But I have been on tests where we've gotten credentials that way. And then since we've got access to the LDAP, right, I've got the entire company directory. My favorite phishing email that I've sent out recently was it was to a bank, and I sent out an email to the entire organization saying, from the marketing department, that they're using those credentials, and I said, hey, check it out, we made national news from our explosive growth, and then I linked them to a fake website that I actually own. Our company owns one that looks like message.com, but it's actually ournessage.com. And it was basically, like a press release site, but I had it set up with Evil Engine X and mimicked an Office 365 sign-on. So they got there and it actually even had their corporately branded Office 365 login page. And they require MFA, so they would type in their username and password. They do the MFA challenge because it was actually proxying right through to Office 365. And then I would get authenticated MFA approved tokens that then I could then go be them on all of their Office 365 structure. Question right here in the middle.
Do you ever come across publicly exposed interfaces?
Publicly exposed interfaces of printers. I have not, but I am convinced that if something is capable of having an IP address, there's probably at least 15 of them on the entire internet. So I'm sure they're out there. I haven't run across them from any clients that we've tested. Any other questions? If not, thank you so much for your time
Yes,
today.
give Tom a round of applause.